Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining me tonight for our latest author virtual panel, which I am really, really excited about. So I've got three great authors tonight. I've got Lynn Rush, who is a New York Times and USA Today best-selling author. Her experience as a former addictions therapist and competitive athlete lends to stories about complex heroines and the men who dare to love them. Kellyanne Blount, a USA Today best-selling author with over 8,500 followers, 85,000 followers, reading is hard today, followers on social media. She contributes to Tap, Wattpad's new app for chat-style stories, where her stories have been tapped over 50 million times. Together, Kelly and Lynn are the co-authors of the YA contemporary romance In the Penalty Box. Amalie Howard is also with us tonight, and she is the award-winning author of several young adult novels, critically acclaimed by the Kirkus, Publishers Weekly, Voya, School Library Journal, and Booklist, including Waterfell, The Almost Girl, and Alpha Goddess, the Kids Indie Next Selection. She is also the co-author of the #1 bestseller in Regency romance, My Rogue, My Ruin, in the Lords of Essex historical romance series. Her most recent Regency romance series, which started with The Beast of Beswick, now continues with her newest release, The Raquel of Roth. She currently resides in Colorado with her husband and 3 children. Well, first and foremost, I just want to say thank you all so much for being here with me tonight.
Thank you for having us. Thank you.
Yeah, this is going to be a lot of fun. As I was sort of telling everyone before we get started in the show, I am, relatively speaking, a newcomer to reading the romance genre, and I've really enjoyed it, actually. It's been a lot of fun getting to see different kinds of stories and different story tropes develop. I am most often, in fiction anyway, found in the fantasy and science fiction sections of the store. And the problem there is, I love them, but I've read them a million times, so sometimes it can feel like I've read the same story. With romance, because I'm so new to it, I don't have that experience yet, so it's really been a lot of fun to get to read things for the first time. But enough about me and my love of love. Let's instead talk a little bit about your books. So, what was the initial spark for writing The Raquel of Roth? Let's start there.
The Raquel of Roth. All right. So this book, right here, it just came out today. So happy release day to me.
Hey, congrats.
Thank you. So this is the second book in the Regency Rogue series. Beast of Beswick was the first. This story is about a rake, a reformed rake, so to speak, who marries a woman in a marriage of convenience, and then he dumps her in the country because he wants to, keep up his lifestyle in London. He's a Marquess, and basically he ends up being very attracted to her, and he doesn't want to have a relationship because he has a lot of baggage. We love those men with all that baggage. And she decides after 3 years of being alone that she just wants to have her husband. She wants her marriage. So she decides to go to London and go get him. The great thing about this book that I love is the female agency. She started out very naive and very young, and then she matured into this woman who said, this is what I want. This is my life. I'm going to go and take it. So that's kind of just the brief background of the Raquel of Roth. But yeah, in terms of what inspired it, it's a second book in the series. So she's the little sister of the heroine from the first book.
Okay. So one of the things that we do in the store, and it's something that I work very hard with everybody on, is what we jokingly refer to as the elevator pitch, or a book in 10 seconds. So help us out a little bit. What would your elevator pitch be for your book?
Okay.
I'm not going to time you. Normally, there's a stopwatch, and I throw water at them when their time's up. It's very Cobra Kai, but with you, we'll do it. We'll do it different.
I will say the elevator pitch is Sleeping Beauty meets As You Like It, Shakespearean fairy tale mashup, in which a young wife who's been left in the country goes to get her husband in London and puts her foot down to say, I want my marriage, I want my husband, and you are not going to get away with just dumping me in the country. I mean, that was rambling. Yeah, okay. And we're in an elevator. Who wants elevator music anyway?
Most of them are rambling. Most of my pitches are rambling. Even the ones I've worked on, it's just it's a polished ramble. That's what I've got going for me. All right,
There you
so
go.
this next question is going to be the exact same question, but this time in regards to in the penalty box. So, Lynn and Kelly, what was the initial spark for writing in the penalty box?
So Lynn and I are both from the Midwest. I'm from Wisconsin and Lynn is from Minnesota. And we wanted some good nostalgic feeling of just cold nights, warm fires, warm kisses, and of course some enemies to lovers or forbidden romance tropes kind of thrown in there. And so we started planning and we ended up mapping out in the penalty box, which we had a great time doing. And just to give you a quick synopsis of it, the book centers around two characters, a female named Willow and a male named Brody, and it's actually told from two point of views. I wrote Willow's point of view and Lynn wrote Brody's. So Willow is a competitive ice skater. She is figure skating and working her way to going to the Olympics. She suffers a devastating injury. She loses her sponsorships and she is sent home. So she goes from this amazing training facility out in Colorado, eye on the gold medal, literally, and boom, she wakes up in northern Wisconsin in a teeny tiny town where everyone is obsessed with hockey. She is determined to overcome her injury, which is a ruptured Achilles. She had surgery on, and that is a really intense injury, especially in a sport where you jump. So she is working her tail off on rehab, and she finds out that a lot of the ice time is taken up by the hockey players. So, what a perfect world if get some more ice time if she maybe throws on a mask and hops out on the ice with them. And that's when she meets Brody. Lynn?
Yay. Literally runs into Brody on the ice. And he's the star of the town, and everyone knows him. You can't walk down the street without getting tackled saying, hey, are we going to win? Are we going to win state this year? All that stuff. And so he's, the star. And here comes this ice princess, because we all know how figure skaters and hockey players get along, right? So here they are, and she literally runs into him, and maybe a few sparks fly. And for her to bat down one of his wild pucks is just a great jump into their relationship. Super fun.
Well, I was going to ask for the elevator pitch, but you guys kind of have one. It's a nice little back and forth you guys have. That's really well done. And as a fellow Midwesterner from Michigan, with a deep and abiding love of hockey, and has certainly felt the frustration of having to share my ice with other people who weren't playing hockey, but were doing their own thing. Yes, there is no love lost between the two warring tribes of the ice. That is definitely a thing.
Toe pick!
It is a thing, for sure. So let me ask you then, these are two very different romances, but similar in ways as well. Obviously, in the penalty box is young adult romance. The Raquel of Roth is for adults. Not that young adult isn't for adults, and not that teenagers can't appreciate adult romance. But when you're writing for those age groups, what are some of the things you see as the commonalities you have, and what are some of the differences? And rather than ask one of you specifically, I'm just going to turn it over for the three of you to sort of figure that one out together, because I don't know how I could direct that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's probably good. I mean, I used to write young adult, so I started in young adult in 2011 and moved into adult romance. The biggest thing for me is booze, swearing, and sex. And I know that those are in young adult books, but when I wrote it, it was more like fade to black scenes. The swearing was very minimized. In the adult romance, I mean, the F word is very prevalent because in the Regency time period, that was used quite a lot. Even though you would think that it's an anachronistic word, but it's not. It's been around for a long time, and then a lot of the sex is open door. It's pages and pages of awesomeness. So For me, that's like the biggest difference. I think what you said, Drew, at first, that kids can read adult books. I mean, I'm not gonna, as an author, I'm never gonna police other people's children. I'm just gonna my own children. If they want to read something, I'll try to read it along with them. But I always say that I would prefer that my 17-year-old read one of my romance novels where the sex is sort of meshed with intimacy and the relationship, as opposed to going and looking online for stuff. And then, I mean, what do you guys think, Lynn, Kelly?
Yeah, I think you're right. Like back 2010, 2011, 2012, like kind of when I started to get into writing, they were more fade to black scenes. When Lynn and I write our young adult books, we have some steamy kisses and makeout scenes, but we usually leave it at that. We tend not to take it too far. At least we haven't yet. And it seems to work really well with our characters. A lot of times there's like a really sweet aspect to their romance. There is some swearing, not a ton, but definitely some. And I feel like at one point, one of our editors was like, yeah, drop that F-bomb way more. Which I was like, oh, okay. That was surprising. And yeah, there's definitely a little scene here and there with some underage drinking. But I think the cool thing is that we show, not everyone there is sloshed, and some of the kids are not drinking, and some are making good choices, and some aren't. So yeah, I think our young adult romance is very palatable to any age. We don't try and push it one way or the other, and I think it just comes out like really sweet and with a nice little side of steam. What do you think, Lynn?
Yeah, side of steam is like the perfect way to say it. And I see the difference of adult and young adult is the themes too. Like the adults are, I mean, that's good. They're going to be in a job and maybe married or divorced or in college or things like that. You have the whole new adult category where it's more the college age, and they're maybe figuring out, how to get through a job or get a job. Whereas in high school, more like, what am I going to do after high school? Am I going to get into college? I mean, so I think the issues are a little different, YA versus adult in that sense too. Both very still prevalent, and you can really up the tension and the spice and the heat in all situations. But I think the topics are just a little bit different.
And there's a lot of self-discovery, right?
Yeah,
which can be across the board. But for a young adult, that might be more, just learning kind of about who they want to be as an adult, but it doesn't have to be final. Whereas maybe in an adult romance, it's more about who am I going to be, not necessarily for the rest of my life, but who am I going to be as an adult? Like, what am I going to let define me? Whereas in high school, you don't necessarily have to be defined by something that'll stick with you the rest of your life.
There's also a lot of firsts in YA, which is really cool. That journey of sort of self-discovery. But the neat thing is, even writing in historical romance, because when you think of these guys, they're like, 17, 18, 19. These are adults. They're not like my 17-year-old. I couldn't even imagine him being a 17-year-old in the 18th century, the 19th century, because they were men then. They ran their estates, But in terms of like firsts and stuff, Isabel, who's my heroine in the Raquel of Roth, she is very young when she gets married at first, doesn't know what to do, but she's a teenager. It's just it's interesting to think about it when you bring the time period into context. And the other thing I love about YA is like just the focus on romantic tension versus the actual act. There's so much build up. Like by the time they kiss, you're ready to like pass out because it's so awesome. I mean, we do that in adult romance too, but you also get the payoff of all the other stuff, which is super nice also. I had a reviewer today say that if you start this book, please have a gallon of water next to you and don't call 911 if you get caught on fire because of it. So I was like, all right.
There you go. That's
yes.
That feels like high praise. That feels like a great thing to have said.
Yes.
So let me ask you, sort of changing gears, and you guys have all touched on this, which makes me wonder if you've looked at my notes. Um, romance in general. I guess two notes here. One is sort of, you touched on how much swearing is in YA, how much fade to black is in YA. And I remember I graduated high school in 2007. And in 2007, the two most popular movies going into that summer were about high school. One was High School Musical 3, I think, and the other was Superbad. And there was an article in the Times that sort of was asking which of these more accurately reflects high school students and their lives today. And my friends and I all joked, and were like, well, we want it to be like Superbad, but it's not. It's far more like it, though, than it is with High School Musical. But so there is certainly something to be said for teens talking in their own language. And it's something that we see today in media as well, whether it's with, and I just am mentioning it because I binged it over the weekend, the new Cobra Kai series on Netflix, which is about the Cobra Kai dojo from Karate Kid 30 years later, and it's teenagers, and they're, acting like teens as I remember being. So I think it makes sense to me that your editor would be like, no, drop the F-bomb some more. I think we're at a place now where we're no longer doing the, early 2000s of, the teenagers, they hold hands, and there's one guy who drinks, but he's a bad guy, and we don't deal with him. Now we're like, all right, look, like, just, keep it reasonable. So my question, I guess, in that big ramble is, do you think that that's a trend that we'll continue to see as more and more we try and capture the real voices of young people? Or is it the kind of thing where we're doing it and it's like a pendulum and it'll eventually swing back the other way?
Whoa.
I think when we move into The Handmaid's Tale, it will swing back the other way. No kidding.
Yeah, no.
I'm just joking.
Yeah.
I'll let Lynn and Kellyanne go first.
Oh man, sorry y'all. My cat just knocked my ring light over, and there was my phone. He likes to be a part of this conversation.
Yeah, he has opinions.
So I think, for us, we tend not to get too explicit. Not because it is, I hate when people say like, oh, I shouldn't say hate, that's a strong word. I dislike when people say, oh, it's a very clean story. It's clean. And it's like, well, sex isn't dirty. Like, don't teach people that. That's not okay, right? Intimacy is not a bad thing.
By the way, Kelly, you're setting up my next question perfectly. So I'm letting you know the trend of you guys just setting them up for me. It's going good.
There we go. Pass it up. But Lynn and I tend to write more sweet romance, and it is a lot about the tension. It's a lot about building up to that first kiss. There are usually one, if not more, almost kisses. And we, really enjoy writing that way and then having a nice, steamy first kiss. But I've read YA books where, sex is in the pages. Sometimes it's fade to black, sometimes it's not. And I think that's fine. I think it's up to every single author or team what they feel is best for their book and their story. But I do think it kind of, and Lynn and I have talked about this a lot, it comes back to having three-dimensional characters, not only for your main characters, but your secondary characters as well. And, reflecting the character in a three-dimensional way, I think allows people to see themselves more in that character and relate to the character. So if you are having a three-dimensional, character and your story features someone who abuses drugs, you're probably going to see that on the page, right? Mm-hmm. But if you're writing a sweet YA romance, you might not have sex on the page. But I think it's up to everybody. Lynn, what do you think?
Agreed. And in our situation, it's a chat about both characters. Now, granted, I write the male point of view and she writes the female point of view. And so our characters are obviously different, but we ping off each other so well that we're like, well, do you think, they do it here? Or do you think they kiss here? Or do you think, what about this? And we always kind of have our readers in mind too. But we also have our personal beliefs as well. So everything plays into making a well-rounded character, like she said, including our beliefs as writers and humans on Earth too. So we take it all into consideration and make great characters.
Yeah, I think that makes complete sense. And as sort of a follow-up to that, the way people make decisions very often and try to live in a certain way based on the media they consume. We all see something on TV or in a movie or read about it, and it seems cool, and so that becomes the latest trend. And I think we've certainly seen that with romance and how we handle romance. When I was younger, a lot of, romantic comedies or romantic movies, it was a will they, won't they, and she'd say no, and he'd keep trying, and eventually she'd say yes, and while on the surface you look at that and go, oh, that's sweet. Now, as adults, and especially as, we've all started communicating a little better, I like to think, we sort of look at those stories a little differently and go, ooh, yeah, no, she said no, and you figured out where she worked, and then you adopted a dog so you could take it to the vet she works at, which is weird, is really weird. Also, sometimes, she's engaged, and that's super not cool to not respect someone's boundary. There's a lot of stuff with that.
Yeah.
How do you think about that when it comes to writing your books? Is it a conscious thing where you go, gee, I want to make sure that I'm portraying this in a way that is, is entertaining and romantic and, potentially, emotionally and or physically charged, but is also shows healthy boundaries? Or you say, well, this character it's a three-dimensional person. He's flawed. He's not supposed to have healthy boundaries. That's kind of his point or her point. How much of that goes into your thinking?
Well, I'll go. I think to what Kellyanne and Lynn said earlier about writing the story and being authentic to the story that you're writing, that's going to depend on that, right? So if you're writing a story about an alcohol drug user, or something, along that line, he might behave differently to someone else. I think we as authors are very careful about stuff like consent, just because you kind of have to be now. I write historical romance, but I always have to be very thoughtful of writing for a modern audience, which means people who are reading stuff are going to have opinions based on these times. So I do have to have consent, even though when you look at some of the historical romances from the 80s, which I loved, there are some serious, dubious scenes come into play. But that's how it was back then. You had a man who, in the Viking, you look at even Viking romances where he grabbed a woman and took him back to his fortress, and it's wait, that's kidnapping and no consent. But you know what I mean? I think we have to be very careful when I'm careful. I'm not going to speak for Lynn and Kellyanne, but I'm careful in terms of having that consent, having the discussion, having the communication. And I'm not saying there's not going to be screw ups. There's absolutely going to be mistakes made. And, he might show up with a puppy and be like, hi, or something in that scenario, being lovely. And she'll be like, no, but I think it's all part of the story. But yes, I absolutely do write taking into account modern sensibilities.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think, I just had a little girl about 2 years ago. She'll be 2 in April.
Oh, congrats.
And thank you. And I like to write characters that I think, especially from the female point of view, when I write, that she would look up to. And I want her to know that consent is absolutely a thing. Does that mean she won't get catcalled at some point? No, of course not. Almost every female I know, if not all, have been catcalled, or men, or however you identify, you have been probably catcalled at some point in your life, right? Mm-hmm. That person might not be the ultimate villain that did it, right? Mm-hmm. However, I think it's good when writing to have consent and have respect, and show that respect comes from both sides. And we don't necessarily have these, the male must open the car door, and the female must accept flowers and bat her eyelashes, that doesn't have to happen, right? Willow straight up hops on the ice with a bunch of boys and is like, let's do this, and they're looking at her like she's this weak female, and she can outskate and outmaneuver almost all of them, if not all of them. So I think it's breaking traditional stereotypes mixed with having respect, having consent, and being sure that, you're trying your hardest to write a character that is authentic, but you want to be sending, at least with, I would say with our books, like we send pretty positive messages, even when dealing with really dark, intense, trauma.
Yeah, again, it's such an interesting sort of line to walk, I guess, because sort of as you mentioned, I remember a lot of my favorite films from the 80s, whether it was like Pretty in Pink or The Breakfast Club, and I love those movies, or 16 Candles, and I go back and I rewatch them and I go, oh no, you can't even, that's not even really borderline, he just gave him the car and the girl, that's not okay. So it's always been interesting to me sort of watching how we've evolved as a society and started listening to other people and trying to, show consent in a very real light, and not just an academic sort of, oh, you should always have consent. And moving on, like, no, let's not move on for a second. Let's kind of examine what that means.
Right.
So I think that's great. And sort of an interesting kind of follow-up, Amalie, you do write in a historical subgenre. Was there a particular reason that you fell into that? How did that process come about?
So yeah, that's actually a really great segue, because we're talking about, just framing our characters. And I love writing Regency. And I love Regency not just because it was a cool time period and very beautiful, as everybody has seen from Bridgerton. The settings, the dresses, everything is amazing. It's very, very visually lush. And I like that time period because women have been subversive from the beginning of time. We're always trying to figure out ways to break a glass ceiling, or to do something different, or to do something that men have traditionally said you can't do. And I think in the 19th century, you had women who, they were viewed as property. They were only bred to marry, and to marry well. They were valued for their wombs and the heirs they could make. And my characters, I wanted my heroines to be strong, to kind of go after what they wanted. So there's real, female agency in terms of what they want, like what my heroines want. And I like the challenge of writing within the structures and the rules of that period. I find it interesting. I love the fact that they wear these big dresses, or they're supposed to ride their horse's side saddle, and women. Even if we look into women from other countries, like I have a book coming out later this summer that's about. It's sort of inspired by an Indian princess, and it's Victorian period. But this woman grew up learning how to fight with swords, how to write, how to, she commandeered an army. And we think about women from all around the world who are these amazing leaders that are leading armies and people. And it's just awesome to be able to kind of write those characters into your books. And, I'm obviously a BIPOC author, so I want to bring that diversity to the page. But it's just interesting, writing within a period where there were rules. Writing contemporary, and Lynn and Kellyanne could probably talk more about it, which I've also done. But you have, I think, a little bit more freedom in terms of, because this is the world we live in, and there's no strict rules for girls. Your girl can go on the ice and kick a guy's butt and be like, yeah, I'm as good as you. But back in those days, she wouldn't even be allowed in a rink. I don't know, making that up. But she wouldn't be allowed in a men's, fighting facility or something. Mm-hmm. Even though in Bridgerton they were, but.
So let's chat briefly then about some of the research that went into this. And this is for both of you, because while your book is set in a different historical period, which requires research and understanding and trying to make the world and the setting feel authentic, Kelly and Lynn, your book is set in the world of hockey, which, as a former player, I can tell you, and I'm sure you guys know as well, has its own rules and traditions and its own very real, culture. So what kind of research did you guys do to kind of, quote-unquote, get it right, I guess?
Yeah, well, so I actually figure skated for a while. I was nowhere near Willow's. Yeah, that's right. Biggie's like, no, you weren't. I was nowhere near Willow's level, anything like that. But I did have a lot of interaction with hockey players. Like you said, sometimes you have to share the ice. And Lynn and I are both athletes, and we both spent time at the rink. And Lynn's going to talk a little bit more about that. And also, you know, having beta readers that could check our work over was like key. But I'll let Lynn tell you a little bit more about that.
Lots of research, and those of you who have read the book, you'll see us doing vocabulary things back and forth just to kind of help talk about the society and the world and the words they use, which we had some pretty fun scenes with that. I had some people on speed dial. I'd text them questions. Hey, I want to say this. Is this right? And he'd be like, yeah, you're funny. Try saying this instead. So yeah, a lot of help from other people. My dad played not competitive, but like club hockey, probably until he was 30. I mean, so that meant I was around it for a while. But I mean, I didn't play. I wasn't like super into it, because I was sometimes kind of upset I had to go every weekend, but, but being in that atmosphere, and then I was raised, he was an athlete, an elite marathoner. So I was around racers. I was around competition. I was all of that, the pressure to be the best, and what happens when you aren't, or what happens when you get injured. So a lot of the things we brought up in the penalty box, Kelly and I have either gone through, we've witnessed, or we have talked extensively with someone who has. So it's pretty well rounded.
Very cool. And Amalie, I was going to say, what kind of research went into creating or to making the time period?
I'm going to make you guys laugh because I actually played hockey in college. And I tried out, I went to Colby, but I tried out. And the reason I did not end up playing for the team is because there was no checking allowed.
Oh.
I was a very violent young woman.
Yeah, no.
And I was like, why is there checking allowed in men's hockey, but not in women's? I'm out. I have been thrown out of a hockey rink for screaming at the refs in my college. I'm terrible. Why am I confessing all this stuff? I'm terrible. That's awesome.
I'll make you feel better because
Okay.
I'll share this and it'll someday come back to haunt me when I run for public office, I'm sure. In 2009, like I said, I'm from Michigan. I'm a huge hockey fan. The Red Wings were in the Stanley Cup Finals against the Penguins, again, with the goal being to win back-to-back titles. I was so loud and so obnoxious, I had an NHL official come talk to me because the players could hear my language and I needed to tone it down or I was going to get thrown out of the game. So I can't say for sure that my heckling shook Sidney Crosby, but I can't say that it didn't either. So you are in good company.
Oh, man. That is nuts. Yeah, no, I was on the glass. I had to be escorted out.
I approve.
I'm a terrible person. That was 1993. Okay, I was very young and stupid. Research. Let's take some time. Wind back. Yeah. So research for I do quite a lot of research because you want to, even though there's a big difference between historical fiction, which is based on real, actual people, and historical romance, which is has a little more flexibility in terms of like creative license. Sure. Not too much. I don't like to have too much in my books because I like to have that. That authentic feel, you want to get the clothing right, you want to get the terms right. So I do quite a bit of research. I like to have people, so if I'm writing about, say, I don't know, like an archaeologist or something, I'll have somebody from that period maybe show up in the book or, just be around to have that kind of, I guess, authentic feel that they're mingling with people that actually existed. I also use etymology.com like religiously just because there's words that didn't exist back then. You know what I mean? I'm trying to think of like a word that, so climax, I'll use that. I'm sorry. I'm blushing. That word actually wasn't invented until like the 1880s. So like if you use that in the Regency period, which is 1815, it's wrong because it didn't exist. But like I said, creative license, some words readers will ignore, other people are more forgiving, and then others will be like, that word did not exist, or something like that. So I'm just very careful with like words that I use. But yeah, I love research and I'll do it because I think it makes the book richer.
Yeah, Absolutely. I was going to say, oh, come on, who would know that the right word or the wrong word? But my degree's in history, and I absolutely do get snippy with things I'm reading where I'm like, well, that's not accurate. They would
Oh, for sure. You don't want to see plastic in there in 1815. Plastic? What?
Yeah, but see, like stuff like that, like I feel like that's common that people wouldn't, would be surprised to see plastic in there. But I mean, I just was like, the word climax, like I would have never known that would have been inaccurate. I would have thought it was being like, I was like, oh, like what a polite way to say that. What a nice, clearly that's the correct word here, because otherwise it's just, would be.
No, and that's something that I learned while writing. Like I brought that up in another discussion. I was like, oh, well, I'll never use that now.
Yeah.
No. I mean, writing in the Regency period, but yeah.
Yeah. So let me ask then, sort of with your writing styles, obviously, Kelly and Lynn, you guys wrote this together, and Amalie, you wrote this solo. So what are some of the challenges that you found in writing alone, and then what are some of the challenges you found in writing with a partner? And Amalie, why don't you start us off there?
Okay, so I actually wrote 7 historical romance books for Entangled with a partner.
Oh, wow. Okay,
so Angie Morgan and I, wrote the Lords of Essex series and the Titans and Tartan series. And a little bit different to the process of Kellyanne and Lynn from what I heard you guys mention before, that you each take a character. Angie and I just did a complete synopsis, like we're talking 20 single-spaced pages of where we were going, and then we just opened a Google Doc and we just wrote. Because historical romance is so stylized and our voices were very similar, we could just start and stop wherever the other person finished. We never did any split up of characters at all. Which you would think that it might be jarring, but I don't know, we just meshed. We were like the same brain. We used to call ourselves one brain. Writing this book alone, or starting with The Beast of Beswick, was interesting just because, I'd written alone before, but I felt like a part of myself was missing. I remember with The Beast of Beswick, I'd be like, yo, tell me if this person would say this, or I need your help with this, or my brain is hitting this wall and I hate everyone. For me, that was the best part of writing with someone, is that you have a constant, cheerleader, friend, person to give it to you straight if you're screwing up, if you get something wrong. And you don't have that writing solo. So there's a little more, it's a mind adjustment, I think. I don't know if Lynn and Kellyanne can speak more about that.
Yeah. Lynn and I joke that we have one brain as well.
Yes.
We will literally be talking on the phone and we'll have a plot issue and we'll be like, okay, how can we fix this? How can we fix this? And then she'll say oh, why don't we do this? And I'm like, oh my God, I just thought of that. At the same time, we come to the same conclusion a lot. I feel like if you asked us questions about, our characters in different rooms with soundproof walls, we'd probably answer the same.
Oh my God, we need to do that, Drew. How do we do this? How do we separate them?
I was going to say, we'll mute them. We'll be the honor system. Someone will mute. And then we'll ask a question, and then we'll unmute, and we'll see.
I love it. Yes, put them in the hot seat.
Don't they do that with husbands and wives?
Yeah.
Yeah. That'll be the next great reality show. It'll be writing partners, or it can be authors and editors, and we can see who really knows the book. That'll be, I think, for a lot of people, fun.
I'm scared.
For book nerds, it'll be fun.
Book nerds have my heart. Yeah, Lynn and I just have similar voice. Similar brain. We just kind of think along the same way. And for us, it was about writing a synopsis and doing a chapter outline for all of our chapters. But we were fluid with it. If we were writing it and it didn't work, we would, make a note and change it. Or we're working on a project right now and I didn't read the outline careful enough. I went a paragraph too far into what happened and I did it wrong. And Lynn was like, oh, I thought we were going to do it this way. And I was like, you are so right. I don't know what I was doing. And at the end I was like, Lynn, help me. I don't know how to end this. Obviously not well. So yeah, it's nice because writing can be super lonely, especially writing during a pandemic. it can be really lonely. And so Lynn and I talk on the phone like every single day. The other day when her line dropped, she said she hit like do not disturb on her phone or something. And I called her back like 3 times. She didn't answer. Yeah. So I texted her husband, like, please go find your wife and make sure she's okay.
You're the person who's getting the puppy to go to the vet's office. You're like, oh no, I adopted this animal. Hi, how are you? What are you doing later?
I am like real good at remembering weird things and pairing it with just creating information in books that you're like, like, did you know, here's a non-sweet romance fact. Did you know if you puncture someone's lungs and you kill them and you puncture their lungs that they will sink instead of float?
No.
I mean, there's a fun fact.
That makes sense. If I go missing, look in bodies of water along the bottom, clearly.
Yeah. I mean, right?
That's good to know for husband murder. I'm kidding. I don't know who said that.
Good. This is where this
I got
is
lots of
going.
good facts. Don't worry. Meet up later. Just kidding. But yeah, writing during the pandemic is lonely. So co-writing is amazing because Lynn is amazing. B, we share a brain, so it's kind of like one person writing twice as fast.
Yep.
C, I really like writing books from alternating point of views, and I think it goes really quickly for us. And, I think the cool thing is if, we're in a chapter and if I'm Willow, I'm still going to write Brody, right? Mm-hmm. Like, it's my chapter, I'm writing it, but if I am not pulling off Brody right, Lynn comes in behind me and she's like, no, he wouldn't say that. And she'll quick edit it, fix it, and boom, we're ready to go. And then I'll do the same with Willow and her chapter. Mm-hmm. But we're so used to the way that, like, we think and chat and write that I find us doing, like, less and less of that.
Yep.
What do you think, Lynn?
Yeah, very true. And again, I've written solo as well, and this is way funner, as Reese Witherspoon would say from her movie. But it's just you get stuck solo sometimes, and you're like, I don't know where to go. And normally you turn to critique partners or an editor or a friend, and
TV.
A TV. Or maybe a little booze, yes.
Yes.
But, Kelly and I just kind of ping off each other really well, so it's pretty awesome.
And there's, besides your editor, a lot of times there's no one who knows your story better than a co-author. Mm-hmm. I mean, like, Lynn and I know our stories inside out. But if, we're talking about solo projects, it's like, okay, well, let me give you the synopsis. Let me give you the backstory. Let me talk about the scene, where it's just like, that one time when Brody did this, and I'm like, oh, girl, I know. I'm like, we don't have to, like, set it up, right?
Right.
To, like, just get through an issue or, like, help me overcome this,
Yes.
So it's really nice.
Yeah. You guys ever have any blowouts, like arguments about where things are going, or just differences of opinion?
Not really.
Amalie,
difference of opinion, but it's never been a blowout. Like, I wanted to say, Brody would say "os" instead of "awesome," and she's like, "No," and I'm like, "Yes," and she's like, "No." I'm like, "Come on!" And then we found out she was right. But it's not like we blew up. We just chatted about it, and I think that's what's pretty special about our relationship. We wrote 5 or 6 books last year together, and the fact that we can talk to each other and say, "Hey, nah, yeah, no." And nobody gets offended.
Yeah, that's really good. And the reason I asked is because I did a workshop on co-writing, and that was one of the questions we got is like, how do you get past the egos? And it's a valid question, when you think about it. You guys look like you have a really great relationship, so that's always good, right? But you figure, especially going into it, if you're doing a first book, I'm taking over your questions, Drew, but I was going to be like, if you had advice for somebody like starting out, like thinking about co-writing. Right? It's a trust thing. Yeah. You're almost interviewing somebody to be your partner. I don't know what the word is.
Oh, I think you need to be on a similar level. I think also a super, basic thing, but not everybody thinks about it, is you need to be able to write with a similar voice. Even though we are writing, 2 different perspectives, it shouldn't feel like there are two completely different people writing the book, right? It should mesh. You should feel comfortable flipping from one chapter to the next. And so I think, finding someone who can either match your voice or you can match their voice and writing style is really important, but also having someone that you respect and knowing that, when you're going along, things need to be fluid, things can change, and you need to be flexible. Because if you have your mind set, like, this needs to happen, this, and you're very rigid about things, co-writing might not be the best for you. But Lynn and I are pretty flexible and we listen really well to each other. I don't think either of us really has a big ego. We joke around about like what big dorks we are a lot. It's just, I talk to my cats a lot, like Lynn knows that. Find someone who like enjoys talking on the phone to you and texting and communicating a lot, because if you don't have that base, it's going to be hard to communicate later on when you do come up with something that you're like, ooh, I don't know about this,
right?
And yeah, just be able to like, oh, you're right, I was wrong. Like,
check the egos at the door.
Yeah, I think that's super important, what you just said. Yeah, because that makes it more difficult if you're like wrong and strong and you're like, the book's going to suck if you can't like be cohesive.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry.
And you know what? One thing
I'm
I've
so
noticed.
jealous. I want to be friends. Can we threesome? I'm kidding. I came out wrong.
Is that a historically accurate word?
I don't think so. I definitely do not think so. Menage is probably the word that's historically accurate.
Yep.
Truth.
Those French, man.
We can book Menage anytime you would like.
Aww.
Well, yay. I just got distracted enjoying. Amalie, you do a better job than I do. I'm gonna email you my questions real quick. Pour myself a second glass of cider and just enjoy.
What kind of cider are you drinking?
What kind of cider? So, I recently decided to embark on a mad dash, 24-hour round trip, no stopping, sleeping in the car road trip to northern Michigan to go to this little brewery called Right Brain Brewery. And there's a cider house called Taproot, and they make a 14% cider with Madagascar vanilla beans, and it's aged in bourbon barrels. It is so good. They will only sell you a couple of growlers of it at a time. I did my booze run, and that's currently what's sitting in the glass here next to me. Oh, it's very good. I'm very fond of it.
Yum.
So let me ask, if I can, sort of our last, I call them the lightning round questions, because they're relatively easy to answer, and then invariably I get emails later and they're like, I thought about it and I hate my answer and this is my new answer. Can you please edit the video? So let's lightning round this. So first of all
right,
we're going to start with Lynn, and then we'll go around, and the next time we'll start with Kelly, and the next time we'll start with Amalie, and we'll do a whole thing.
I'm scared.
Nope, it's going to be totally fine. This is easy. I believe in you. If you could pick one author to write a blurb on the back of your dust cover, who would it be and why?
Oh my gosh, you guys, I love Rebecca Zanetti. I would love for her to blurb me.
Okay, very cool. See, easy. Yes!
Kelly?
Lynn!
Oh,
and she did. She blurbed I Hate You, Fuller James. It's right there.
Perfect. All right. Amalie?
Mine would be Lisa Kleypas, and I actually got her to blurb my next book coming out in June, so I'm very, very grateful to her. She is my idol. I love her.
That's
love
awesome.
her.
All right. So the next one in this lightning round, we're going to start with Kelly on this one. Who would you say is your authorial doppelganger?
Lynn! She really is, y'all. The first time, so when Lynn and I met online through our agency author email loop, we started critiquing for each other, and I was reading one of her books, and I was like, oh, this sounds exactly like how I would write this scene. Like, it threw me for such a hard loop. I've never had that kind of reaction reading any book before. And when I was reading it, I thought to myself, holy crap, this sounds like I wrote it. Like, it was amazing. So, Lynn.
All right, fair enough. Amalie, what about you?
I'm gonna say that I want to be like. I'm kidding. I love Tessa Dare. I like her voice. I think she has a wonderful sort of cross between, like balance between contemporary and historical, which modern readers seem to love. And I love that kind of voice for Hisrom. So I think I don't know if she's my doppelganger, but I'd like to be her, maybe. when I grow up.
All right. And Lynn, what about you?
Yeah, so I was thinking the same thing with Kelly. Now I write contemporary with Kelly, but I write paranormal on my own. Mm-hmm. So I know that Chris Cannon does both as well. So I would call her maybe a secondary doppelganger. Kelly first, maybe Chris second, just because she writes the paranormal side of things as well. Mm-hmm. But Kelly's right. We literally can read each other's stuff, and it's like, okay, very similar. And how we met on the agency loop and everything, like I said, good fit, one brain.
Perfect. All right, so this is the last question of the lightning round, and then I've got my final question, but it's also my favorite question I've thought up for this lightning round with you guys. So, it is Valentine's Day, or so I'm told, this weekend. If you had to pick one character from the books that you've written, doesn't have to be the books that we're talking about today, could be anything in your literary canon, to go and have a Valentine's Day date with. You're not spending your life with this person. There are no expectations. You know, it's just Valentine's Day. Who would it be and why? And Amalie, we're going to start with you this time.
Me first. Oh man. All right. I would have to say that it's probably the awesome hero. I'm going to say the hero from this book because he's on my mind and he's very attractive and everyone's talking about him. So I would go on a date with him. Actually, no, I'd go on a date with Isabel because she's a badass. Mm-hmm. And I love the fact that she goes after what she wants. So my date would be a Galentine date because I would go with her instead of the hero.
I dig it. All right. Lynn, what about you?
Oh, I'm debating between my 400-year-old half demon from the first book I ever wrote. Mm-hmm. His name is David.
Always remember your first one, yeah.
Oh my gosh, yes. He's the first one I ever published. Oh, let's see here. I would have to say Corey Chaos. All right. Kelly and I have a 12-book deal, of which the first book will start releasing sometime in spring, hopefully. Oh, and he's, I think, the third book. Is that what we decided? Corey Chaos. Oh, he's so dreamy. And he plays a guitar and he can like sing to me.
Okay, yes. I dig it. Kelly, what about you?
I was gonna pick Corey Chaos because we share the same brain.
See, I told you they fight. They're totally gonna fight now.
Yeah, this is the real love triangle.
Corey Chaos. Oh my gosh, he is just. He's
Jace
great.
is pretty awesome too, though.
I know. I was also thinking Tony, though, right? Tony has a really big heart.
Do you feel weirdly left out in this, Amalie? Because I do. They're naming all these people.
I know, and they're hugging each other and like this.
I'm like, I don't really know who Tony is, but I'm on his side now. There's just a lot of emotion there.
Tony just got ditched. Like he just ditched on the side.
I do. I love me some Logan though as well. Logan has been through a lot. He's kind of a bad boy, but very redeemable and like, yeah.
I'm gonna.
I like them all, but I do think Corey Chaos is probably my favorite.
Okay, very cool. I'm definitely gonna need one or all three of you to help rewrite my OkCupid profile because clearly it needs work. I would never describe myself as like a bad boy with a bit of a troubled past, but now I'm like, okay, now know what.
I know, and you can change. You can go to Drew Chaos. You can have that last name.
I could. I'd have to. I'd have to shave like just one side, or do the beard like with like lightning in it or something. I'd have to figure that out. It's okay. The marketing team, I'm sure, will help us there.
Yeah, we'll get PR on that.
Exactly. Whoever does the covers, they will help this. So I guess my final question for tonight, and Amalie, you sort of touched on it a little earlier, but I'm gonna kind of drill on it a little bit. I generally tend to ask authors, hey, what's advice that you would give to young people who are starting out writing, and how would you help them? I want to make it a little bit more specific. I joke all the time that romance is the genre that is literally in every single fiction. You cannot find a book that is fiction. I mean, there's nonfiction, obviously. But you cannot find a book that is fiction that does not have an element of romance in it, because that's the human condition. We're all conditioned to want to be with someone or someones, and that's part of storytelling. But so often, I will read books where the romance was clearly written by someone who has either A, never experienced romance themselves, or B, did so in a really stunted and awkward way. What is some advice that you could give to authors, whether they're experienced or starting out, to help make the romance feel either A, believable, or B, at least appealing? I would settle for appealing with several of the authors I'm thinking of right now. And we'll start with, I don't know, who doesn't want to go? We'll do the nose. Let's start with Lynn.
All right. You know, when I was counseling, in my bio, you read that I was a former addictions counselor, and I was not in recovery. And I got that question, well, are you equipped to help me, overcome my addiction? I'm like, well, I don't have to get shot in the foot to know it hurts, but I do have to know a little. And so I mean, more than a little, you know what I mean? I went to AA meetings. I went to NA meetings. I worked in treatment facilities. I enmeshed myself in the world to see it and to experience it as best I could and as safely as I could. And then I read a ton. And while it doesn't get me into exactly their shoes, it helps me with the empathy and try to understand where they're coming from, while bringing my unique viewpoint to the situation too. So it's kind of the same with writing. It's like, I don't necessarily know what it's like to be a boy, but yet I love to write the male point of view. I studied it. I took classes on it. I eventually started teaching on it, and immersed myself in it. Like with Brody, for a while I kept a daily journal, and I would write in the journal as if I was Brody, dealing with what I was dealing with today. So it enmeshed me in the character. So if you're a newbie writer and maybe not as experienced, doing that could be one thing, like a journal, to get in your character's head and to really be them. So that's one thing I'll just hit on. Okay. Whoever wants to jump in next.
All
Me?
right.
Okay.
She pointed you.
I will go. I saw the point. I'm in it. I'm in it to win it. So I do find that I like to watch movies, read books, stare at people out in public. One time I almost asked a person if I could take their picture because they were so stunning. And I was like, he probably is going to think this is really weird. I was like, I need someone in the future to look like him in a book that I write. But I think, when you write like a sweet character, I think it is helpful to have like sweet moments that you've either encountered firsthand or seen on screen or seen play out at the park. Think of those moments. And I like to think about all of your senses, right? Like, what did you see? What did you smell? What did you touch? You go through everything, and it helps make the scene really real. And I think, being authentic, like Lynn said, she doesn't identify as a male. So, writing from a guy's point of view is something that she has had to research, and she has had to put herself in someone else's shoes. So I do think, you have to be willing to learn and to learn more about your craft. You can get books up from the library on writing. You can read blogs for free on writing online, right? There are a ton of resources, but I do think expanding your horizon with books and, movies and audiobooks and just plays, anything along those lines, I feel like helps expand your horizons. And I feel like writers, we tend to have, like this thirst for knowledge and this thirst for for sharing stories with the world, and those two things kind of pair nicely together. I do feel like if you're a very like closed-minded person who doesn't like to learn new things, I feel like your stories are going to be pretty one-dimensional and probably, the same stuff over and over and over again. So I think, something like, okay, let's dive back into the world of hockey. It's been a minute, but like, let's do this,
Yep.
just having that excitement to learn and talk about it is really important. And I think all aspiring writers should also know it is a marathon, not a sprint, and just be prepared.
I think the only thing I would add to what Kellyanne and Lynn said was just be aware of like emotional beats, right? So you look at, if you're talking about films and movies and stuff like that, look at what makes you feel something. And if you connect in that moment, that's what you want to translate into your writing. Because that's what's going to make your readers and your fans keep coming back to you, is that you make them feel something, whether it's something here or, sad or angry or fraught with emotion, or, people talk about YA being full of angst, and it is, because teenagers tend to feel things more intensely. You just look for those emotional beats and make sure you hit them. Because if you're not hitting them, then it's not there. You're not giving your reader something that is satisfying by the end of the book.
Yeah. All of that is spectacular advice. It is definitely... I really wish I could just sit down with a number of people who have written the scenes I'm thinking of and just go, why? Why did this happen this way? Who hurt you? Show me on the doll. But I have to shamelessly plug my store now, or I will forget. And it's happened once before, and I was given no amount of grief for it. No ending to the grief, I should say. So if listening to this sounds, if you had fun, and you went, gee, I like these books, and I'd like to own them, or, hey, that Drew guy, he seems funny, and also, a little desperate for money, so I should support his bookstore. You can do that. We're located in Collegeville, Pennsylvania. You can come in, you can browse, you can pick up the books we've been talking about tonight. If, however, you're not in the state, or you don't feel comfortable being out there, it's totally fine. You can always shop online with us at townbc.com. That's TOWN as in Nike, E as in Echo, B as in Bravo, C as in Charlie.com. And I just wanted to once again thank the authors for being here with me tonight and enduring my awkward questions and sticking around for the post-show drinks. We're gonna that's when it'll get really crazy. That's when it goes blue.
Also, I sent you some signed book plates, so you should have those for anybody.
Yes,
I think you have goodies from us as well.
Yes, we do have goodies.
Okay.
We've got signed book plates. We've got all sorts of goodies. So whenever you come in, even if you're ordering online, we are happy to send those along to you.
Cool.
So again, thank you all for being with me here tonight, and thank you, the three of you in particular, for spending your today's Tuesday night with me. Every day is the same when you work every day,
Well, thank you so much for having us. This was amazing, and we really enjoyed it.
Oh, well, thank you.
I say
Thank you.
because I'm speaking for Lynn and I.
I'm in the group now. Okay.
Oh yeah, and Amalie.
I'm in the girl group. Okay.
We all enjoyed it very much.
Yes.
I'm glad. Thanks again, everyone, and we'll see you guys next time. Take care.
Thank you, Drew. See ya.